I was 12 years old the day I got handcuffed in the middle of a park for telling the truth about my dad, and 12 years old the day 3 black SUVs rolled up and proved everybody wrong. You know what I mean? It still feels unreal saying it out loud like that. But yeah, that happened. And the wildest part is my story is both crazy and completely normal for where I'm from. I grew up in a small apartment in Southeast DC, Anacostia, side second floor, thin walls, chipped paint, the kind of building people drive past with their doors locked inside. That little place, it smelled like coffee and laundry detergent and whatever my mom could throw together after a 12-hour ER shift. It was home, and it was also the last place anybody would imagine a 4-star general lived. On every school form, my dad was listed as government employee. That was the official line. No details, no bragging, no stories. Just that the real truth was louder. My father, General Darius Washington, wore 4 silver stars on his shoulders and worked at the Pentagon, one of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Army. He briefed people whose names you see on TV flew in and out of places I still can't spell. But at night, he sat at our wobbly kitchen table telling me to sit up straight and finish my math homework, and if you walked into our building, you would never know who he was. My parents made that choice on purpose. They lived small and quiet for safety, for privacy, and for me, and with that choice came rules. I can still hear my mom's voice. Jamal, be respectful, move slow around cops, and do not under any circumstances go around telling people what your father does not, because we're ashamed, baby, because they will treat you differently, and not in a good way. For a long time, I followed the script when teachers asked what my dad did. I said he works in defense, when kids joked that my father was probably gone or locked up. I swallowed it, pretended it didn't bother me, but you can only swallow something like that for so long before it burns every time it goes down. One Tuesday, it boiled over. I was riding my bike home from school, backpack half open, wind in my face, cutting through the neighborhood like I always did when a voice snapped behind me. "Hey kid on the bike, stop right there." I hit the brakes, front wheel wobbling, and turned. Officer Ramirez was standing in the street, hand resting on her belt, like it grew there. She was one of those officers everyone in the neighborhood knew. Shorter, sharp eyes carried herself like every interaction might turn into a fight. She stepped right into my path, arm out, making me put a foot down on the pavement. "Where you headed?" she asked. Not friendly, just checking. I told her I was going home. She took my school ID, looked it over, glanced at my phone when the screen lit up with my lock screen. A photo of my dad in uniform, the stars on his shoulders blurred on purpose, but his face and ribbons still clear. "Who's this supposed to be?" she asked, and the way she said "supposed to" told me she had already decided it was a lie. I said, "That's my dad, ma'am," trying to sound respectful, trying to do everything the way my parents taught me. She gave this tight little laugh that had zero humor in it. "Your dad, huh? So what is he, some big shot at the Pentagon?" She meant it as a joke, but that was the moment something inside me flipped. The safe answer was, he works for the government. I had said that line 100 times, but that afternoon I was tired. Tired of the cracks, tired of the assumptions, tired of pretending the man who tucked me in at night was small, just so other people could be comfortable. So I took a breath and said, "Yes, ma'am, he's a 4-star general." Her whole face hardened like I had slapped her, instead of answered a question. "A 4-star general," she repeated. "And he lets his son ride some busted bike through this neighborhood. Kids like you do not have fathers with 4 stars, you stop lying right now." That phrase, "kids like you," hit harder than anything else. I felt my face get hot. My hands tightened on the handlebars. I kept saying, "Ma'am, I'm not lying, I swear." But it didn't matter. She waved me off like I was a bug and told me to go home and stop making up stories. And I rode the rest of the way with that sentence pressed into my chest like a bruise. At home, I pushed my bike through the doorway and into our little apartment, dropped my backpack next to the table, exactly how my dad had shown me everything in its place, even when your mind is a mess. My mom came in not long after, Scrub's wrinkled eyes tired, but she caught my face in one glance and said, "All right, baby, what happened?" So I told her all of it. The laugh, the disbelief, "kids like you," the way my truth sounded impossible to her. My mom didn't look surprised. She just looked sad, like she'd been expecting this. "I knew this day was coming," she said quietly. "When you get closer to 13, some people stop seeing a little boy and start seeing whatever they're afraid of. Your truth is going to sound too big for the box they put you in." And that hurt because it was true. When my dad got home at sunset, the whole atmosphere in the apartment shifted like it always did. Not out of fear, just out of respect. He changed into a plain t-shirt, then called me out to the balcony. We had this nightly ritual where we took down the little American flag we kept there, folding it corner to corner, tight and precise. He used it to teach me history and discipline at the same time. That night when we finished, he kept his hand on my shoulder and said, "Talk to me, son." So I told him about Ramirez, about the bike, the phone picture, kids like you, and how small I had felt. He listened without interrupting, eyes, steady face, calm, in that way that meant he was furious under the surface, but controlling it. When I finished, he took a slow breath and said, "Some people cannot imagine greatness coming from an address like ours or a face like yours. When they can't imagine it, they deny it. That denial is not about you, it's about them." And I wanted to believe that, but the sting didn't magically disappear. "I'm tired of hiding who you are," I told him. "I'm proud of you. It feels wrong to act like you're just some random federal worker." He looked out over the parked cars and cracked concrete like he was weighing 1,000 invisible factors. Security, secrecy, my safety, my dignity. Then he nodded. "If you choose to tell people you do it with dignity," he said, "no bragging, no anger. The truth does not need you to shout for it, but be ready. Not everyone will believe you even if I'm standing right there." My mom joined us, leaning against the doorframe. "And some will twist your truth because they only know how to see you as a stereotype," she added. "You don't have to shrink for them, but I need you alive, Jamal. Remember that part." That night, lying in the dark with my phone lighting up my blanket, I stared at the group chat with my friends. Deshaun, the livestream kid, Sophia with the big heart, Tyler from the nicer side of town. My fingers hovered thinking about Ramirez saying, "Kids like you," and my dad's voice saying, "Dignity." Then I typed, "Tomorrow at Marion Park, I'm finally telling y'all who my dad really is." Hit send, and just stared at the screen thinking, well, here we go. Saturday at the park, the air felt heavy in that lazy weekend way. Kids chasing balls, speakers playing music grills, smoking in the distance. I climbed up on one of those concrete benches with my little Bluetooth speaker playing low. Deshaun already had his phone out. "Yo, we live," he grinned. "Jamal says he's gonna drop something big." People drifted over out of curiosity. I started simple talking about my dad as a father. How he tucked me in made me refold the flag. If I got it wrong, taught me to say "yes, sir" and "yes, ma'am," even when I was mad. Then I talked about the stuff I usually kept locked up, how he had medals locked in a safe, because he said what mattered was the people who made it home, not the medal on his chest. How he disappeared sometimes, and my mom set a place at the table like he might walk in any minute. Finally, I took a breath and said, "My dad is a 4-star general. He works at the Pentagon. And I'm tired of acting like that's too big for a kid from our building." The reactions were instant. A few gasps, some skeptical laughs. A couple kids straight up said, "Man, nobody from here has a parent like that." One girl asked if I meant retired. Another asked if it was honorary. I stood there with my heart banging against my ribs and repeated, "He is active. I'm not making it up." What I didn't see while I was talking was 2 officers on foot patrol heading our way. Officer Patricia Whitaker, white mid-40s, 20-plus years on the job, reputation for being strict and jumpy, and Sergeant Marcus Cole, black younger from neighborhoods like ours, more measured. They heard 4-star and Pentagon, and I guess for Whitaker that was enough. She muttered, "Not this again," and decided before she even reached us that I was another kid using a magic relative to dodge trouble. She stepped in front of the bench, voice all authority. "All right, show's over. Park isn't for speeches, everybody move along." I hopped down, kept my hands visible. "Yes, ma'am, we were just talking," I said. She gave me that look cops give when they think you're slick. "Name." She snapped, "Jamal Washington, ma'am." "ID." I pulled out my school ID, slow and careful, handed it to her. She looked at it like she was trying to find a lie printed on the plastic. Then her eyes slid to my phone when the screen lit up with my dad's blurred uniform picture. "Who is this supposed to be?" she asked. "My father," I answered. "And he's the 4-star general you're telling everyone about," she said, voice dripping disbelief. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "He works at the Pentagon." She typed my name into her handheld, stared at the results. All it said in the family line was, "Father, government employee." That vague language they use when someone has a high clearance. To her, it just looked like more nonsense. She handed my ID back with a little snort. "Nice try," she said. "Now tell me who your real father is." The kids went quiet. Sophia inched closer. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear. I said, "Ma'am, that is the truth. You can call my mom." Her jaw set. "Let me explain something," she said, stepping closer. 4-star generals do not raise their kids in this neighborhood, and they do not let them stand on benches bragging about medals when a kid lies to avoid a search that tells me he's hiding something. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I'm not hiding anything. I said. I was answering a question. Sergeant Cole leaned in low voice. Patricia, he's a kid. Let's slow down and call his parents. She waved him off like noise looked right back at me. Turn around, she said. Hands behind your back. I'm done playing games. That was the moment the world got very small, just the sound of my own heartbeat and my father's instructions in my head. No sudden moves, no arguing with a gun and a badge, so I turned slowly, put my hands behind my back, felt cold metal wrap around my wrists, heard kids gasp, heard Sophia start crying, heard Deshaun whisper, keep filming, his live stream comments exploding with, what is happening? He's just a kid. And I begged her as calm as I could. Ma'am, please just call my mother. She'll tell you everything. She clicked the second cuff and said, you refuse to tell me the truth. That's non-compliance. You can explain yourself downtown. She radioed in, juvenile male non-compliant suspected false identification requesting transport. She never once mentioned the truth. I'd already given her, never once considered that the problem wasn't my story. It was her assumptions about who someone like me could be. Sitting on the curb with my wrists locked behind me, gravel digging into my knees, I kept saying one thing in my head like a mantra. My dad is a 4-star general. He's coming. He always comes. Across the city. Inside a secure conference room deep in the Pentagon, my father's phone buzzed on the table. He doesn't check his phone during briefings, but this time it vibrated over and over with the same urgent pattern. He glanced down, saw a text from my mom. They've handcuffed Jamal at Marion Park. Come now. And that was it. He stood up, placed both hands on the table, and said in a voice everyone there was trained to obey, Gentlemen, my son needs me, and walked out. Nobody stopped him. Nobody asked for more. Within minutes, his security detail had the convoy rolling 3 black Suburbans, military plates, engines low, no sirens or flashing lights, just a steady, unstoppable line crossing the bridge toward a neighborhood their GPS probably never took them to. Back at the park, the tension was so thick you could taste it. Kids stood in a loose circle around me, some filming, some crying. Strangers had stopped what they were doing to stare. Tyler was pacing, talking into his phone, telling the dispatcher his friend was being arrested for no reason. Sergeant Cole stood with his arms folded, looking like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin, he told her again. We really should call his parents, she snapped. You can do that when he's in the car. I sat on the curb trying not to cry because somewhere in the back of my mind I could hear my dad saying, they can take a lot from you, but don't hand them your dignity. So I kept my voice steady and said one more time, when my father finds out what you did, you'll see I was telling the truth. She actually laughed at that. Son 4-star generals don't raise their kids in Section 8 housing, she said. They don't let them stand around telling stories in parks. That hurt worse than the cuffs, because she was mocking the life my parents had chosen on purpose, not because they had to. Then the mood shifted first in sound. Music cut off. Basketballs stopped bouncing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Then in sight, 3 black SUVs rolled up to the edge of the park, gliding to a perfect stop. No noise, just presence. The doors didn't fly open. There was no drama. The driver of the lead SUV stepped out in a dress uniform, walked around to the back with ceremony and opened the door, and my father stepped out in full dress blues, service ribbons across his chest, 4 silver stars shining on each shoulder, his posture straight and calm and terrifyingly controlled. For a second nobody breathed. Then you heard it. Little gasps, a whispered, "Oh my God," someone saying, "He really was telling the truth." Officer Whitaker froze, color draining from her face. Cole actually whispered, "No way," under his breath. My father didn't look left or right. His eyes locked on me, sitting there with cuffs on. He walked straight past her like she was a piece of furniture and crouched down, so we were eye level. "I'm here," he said. 2 words, and every bit of fear I'd been holding shook loose. I wanted to collapse into him, but he squeezed my shoulder, stood up and turned to Whitaker. His voice never rose, but you could feel the weight in it. "Officer, remove the handcuffs from my son now." That "now" hit harder than any shout could have. Her hands shook so bad she fumbled the key when the cuffs finally clicked open. That tiny sound echoed across the park like a judge's gavel. He kept one arm around me and faced her fully, his tone still measured. I have commanded brigades under fire, he said. I have made decisions that sent young men and women into danger. Yet today, the greatest threat my 12-year-old son faced was not a battlefield. It was the assumption that his truth was impossible because of where we live and what we look like. He didn't scream, he didn't call her names, he just laid it out. Mistakes can be corrected, he went on. Bias ignored cannot bias unexamined becomes a danger to the people you swore to protect and to the uniform you wear. Her eyes filled, her shoulders shook. She whispered, "Sir, I made a terrible mistake." And for the first time she sounded like a human being instead of a badge. He stepped an inch closer, not to threaten but to make sure she couldn't escape his words. "What matters now is not what you did," he said. "It's what you choose to do after knowing the damage it caused." Then he turned away from her and looked at the circle of kids' phones in the air. Eyes, huge voices stuck in their throats. "You did the right thing by watching," he told us. "By recording, by refusing to look away. Never underestimate the power of your voice, even at your age." Then he looked at Deshawn's shaking phone and said, "Keep filming, truth needs witnesses." And just like that, in one afternoon, my whole life and our whole precinct got dragged into the light. 90 days later, things looked different. Not magically fixed, not suddenly fair, but different. The video had gone viral, like 50 million views in the first 3 days. It played on news networks and police academies and classrooms where teachers paused and looked at their students like, "We need to talk about this." Internal Affairs ran an investigation that for once didn't move at glacial speed. They pulled body cam footage, radio logs, statements from kids and adults who had been at the park, old performance reviews, and what came out was simple and ugly. Officer Whitaker had escalated without cause, violated juvenile protocols, and let bias and old trauma override her judgment. She got 30 days without pay, had to do a pile of bias and trauma. Informed policing trainings, lost patrol duty, and went to a desk. Later, she was assigned to help train new recruits using her own body cam footage and Deshawn's live stream as a warning. Some people said that was justice. Others said it wasn't nearly enough. I'm still not totally sure how I feel about it, and that's me being honest with you. Our district chief, a black woman named Hayes, stood up in front of cameras and said straight out, "We failed this child," then rolled out changes. Mandatory body cams for any interaction with kids. No handcuffs on children under 14, unless there's an immediate safety threat. Regular coffee with a cop events in our park where they sit and listen instead of lecture a civilian review board with subpoena power. And this new thing started by us kids that grew bigger than we expected. Something we called Truth Circle, where once a month the community center fills up, we drag out folding chairs. Kids sit in a big messy circle. Officers sit among us and we talk about what we've seen and felt without being cut off. They have to listen first, then respond. One night at Truth Circle, the room was packed. My dad stood up front in a simple dark suit, no stars on his shoulders behind him. A projector clicked through slides, numbers about how many more times black kids are likely to be stopped, arrested, or killed by police compared to white kids. No music, no drama, just facts hanging in the air like weights. You could feel the officers shifting, not angry, more like uncomfortable in a way that meant the truth was landing. My dad said, "Numbers do not lie. Children do not lie. When the experiences of our kids match the statistics of our nation, that is not an accident, it is a responsibility." Then he looked around the room, at the uniforms, at the parents, at us, and asked the question that still sticks with me. The next time a black child tells you something about their life that sounds too big for where they're from, are you going to demand proof, or are you simply going to listen? And then he added softer, "My son survived his moment because the world saw it. There are others who never got that chance." So yeah, I was that kid on the curb, the one some people still know as the general's son from the park video. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just wanted to ride my bike, tell my friends the truth about my father, and keep my dignity, and instead I watched a whole city pause, look in the mirror, and argue with itself about what justice really looks like. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think what happened to Officer Whitaker was enough? Does training and a suspension even begin to touch the harm of putting cuffs on a 12-year-old for telling the truth? Or should there have been more and bigger than her? Do you think anything really changes when the cameras are off? Or do stories like mine only get taken seriously because a 4-star general showed up in full uniform and the video went viral? If you've ever been doubted, profiled, or talked down to because of where you're from or what you look like, I really want you to share that in the comments. If you wear a uniform and you're watching this, I'm asking you straight up, which voice is louder in you right now? Fear or responsibility? Tell me where you're watching from. Hit. Like if this hits something inside you, subscribe. If you want more stories that don't just entertain, but force us to talk about bias, power, and what justice should look like when it's your kid sitting on the curb.